Hi, I'm Scarlett,
And I'm Mim.
and welcome back to Style Over Substance, the podcast.
And this week we have a brand episode. It's not one we've done in a long time, this sort of episode
Yeah.
where we take a brand and we talk about it because we love it or it's particularly interesting, and we give you the history of it and we chat about our thoughts on this brand. And this week we are starting with quite a significant brand for like the 2020s, 2010s. A brand that we've discussed briefly in the past, and yeah, one I love. So we're doing the Row. Anyway, so how much of the Row's history do you know?
I remember when they founded it.
Okay.
I sort of remember. So, for those who don't know, this is owned by Mary-Kate and Ashley, the Olsen twins.
Yep.
It was sort of like quite an unusual move.
Mm-hmm.
They had just been doing sort of their films, they'd done all like their twin stuff. And then it was just a real, and obviously they'd always been fashion girlies. They sort of were like the first like it girls kind of our like youth somewhat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And not that I was aware of, many people had done this sort of like foray and just like moved. Like they had their production company, they were already businesswomen, but it felt really out of the blue for them just to kind of create a brand.
Yeah, you're right in that at the time it felt perplexing, but really when we go through everything and we take it into context, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that we talk about Victoria Beckham a lot.
Yeah.
And Victoria Beckham coming out with her brand, and the Row was this era of time where celebrities were coming into fashion in a bit more of a serious way. And I remember, I don't know if you do, but there was a little bit of a backlash, like, oh, celebrities are just going to stick their name on it and call it a brand, and it's going to be successful because they're going to carry their like cultural weight with it. But they don't deserve it. They're not real designers, and us designers who, you know, have studied for the craft deserve success more. And we touched on like nepotism in fashion and things, but
yeah, I feel like I also remember like even maybe it wasn't their first collection, but it was, yeah, they were kind of getting into the oversized clothing and big coats, and they were skinny girls. Everything was sort of oversized with big handbags. But similar to Victoria Beckham, they're not like just designing clothes that they want to wear. They were designing with a vision and with a purpose, and it wasn't necessarily about them, and it felt serious.
And I think that's something that's significant about the Row is how much of a serious brand it has become. It is not. It does not rest on the laurels of Mary-Kate and Ashley's fame.
They very much almost like remove, like they're not in the ad campaigns, like they're not really out there promote, like VB promotes, you know, she is out there like if she's wearing something, yeah. But they've just let their designs do the talking, and maybe to begin with it was fans loving them and buying it, but it's expensive.
Yeah, so let's get
Tell me
into
more.
it. So I think we can't discuss the brand without discussing the girls, the women, the icons themselves.
Yeah, I
So
loved them so much.
yeah, Mary-Kate and Ashley, twins, identical twins, born in 1986. Okay, I think that puts them as like 36, 35 at the moment. Yeah. And they started acting from when they were like 9 months old. And their big role was when they landed a permanent character, a shared role between them in Full House. So they became like household names. And throughout their childhood, as I said, like from infancy, they have been acting, doing adverts, commercials, you name it. They also had as they were like young women and teenagers, came out with lines that had their names on the brand essentially. And it was targeted at like young teen girls. It was like homeware, accessories,
I had a Barbie
fashion.
doll.
Did you have a doll?
I had a Barbie doll.
Yeah, man. Yeah. We were the target generation.
And you could curl its hair and it would stay.
Oh.
Like they had a little mini like curling
wand. Okay, I didn't have anything from them, but I mean they were like a mainstay in popular culture. So they've always been working, always making money. And fashion, when you're targeting to young girls, is always the thing that's targeted, like, we're going to go after that demographic via fashion, you know? So actually, they, at that point, working with, I believe, Walmart, they had collections with Walmart, and they, in 2004, had signed a pledge to ensure that all the like the seamstresses working overseas, working on their stuff, would have access to full maternity leave. And at the time, this was like really significant. I mean, it's still really significant now.
Yeah.
I don't know to what extent they could control the actual, if this was actually implemented in a lot of workshops. In a lot of workshops in like Bangladesh and whatnot. But the idea and the thought is there, you know, the idea of whoever's making these things are owed a level of dignity and support. So that's really cool. In 2006 is when they actually launched the row. And the row, I know, it's such a long time ago, isn't it?
They were 20. They were born in 86. I feel like they were older, but like they felt old, like they were.
They've been around in our minds for such a long time that they age quicker, isn't it? And around about the same time, oh, sorry, I should mention that the row is named after Savile Row in London. Did you know that?
Tailoring.
Yeah. Okay.
Because they have another line called Elizabeth and James, and that's the names of their siblings.
That was my next point. Did you say that? And that was formed around the similar time, and it was a more contemporary, accessible line, as you said, named after their other two siblings. So yeah, they were 20 years old, starting off the row. But as you mentioned before,
that's a pretty bold name, right?
It's very strong. It's a strong one, I think.
To name something after the most famous place for tailoring, I'm guessing, in the world, like the history, the prestige, the fact that, like, yes, they're fashion girls, but they don't know, like, they're not formally trained. They don't know tailoring. So to, like, put such a strong name on it, I think shows maybe how serious they were.
Definitely. I mean, it could have gone badly for them.
Yeah.
But it hasn't so far. It's a really good name. It also, as you said, distances them from being the brand ambassadors of these roles. You know, they, at the forefront, it was a brand and a vision that they had. Obviously, a clear direction. They knew that tailoring was at the forefront of what they were going to be doing. And so, yeah, really coming out swinging. And they weren't resting on their celebrity, first and foremost. And I think there's probably a lot of people today don't even know that Mary-Kate and Ashley
that's what I mean,
are part of it in any shape or form.
And I think that's clearly what, calling it a name that is so far removed from them. They weren't in the ad campaigns. They still aren't. They're very low key. It could have just been called the Olsen. Like anything.
Yeah, it could have been called Olsen.
Yeah,
or
it
something.
Just could have been called anything, but they clearly, like, it was considered. That's what it tells me.
Yes, that's a really good way to put it. So you also mentioned that they had their own business. They were businesswomen in their own right. And it was called, they had a production company through which they ran all of their offshoots, their licensing, their production, everything. And that was called Jules Star. And in 2007, they were ranked as the 11th most richest women in entertainment. So they'd been making a hell of a lot of money.
I think they got really good advice. Like, I think that production company was like someone giving them some really solid advice of, like, here's how you make this money count.
And Jules Star to this day is the parent company of the row. So it's, I don't know, still fully owned by them. So yeah, and I think it's quite interesting. Like, this has been funded by the massive amount of wealth that they created before even starting their brand. So in terms of Mary-Kate and Ashley and their style, you know, we know they've always been packaged as a duo, an item, you know. They've never really gone on and done things separately, really. I know that I think Mary-Kate continued to act a bit longer than Ashley, but not that I know of, but from what I've read. So, but really, by and large, they've always been together, and I think that when we talk about their fashion and their style, that is really key because they've always dressed as an item. They don't dress wildly different from the other. They have their own little, you know, personality, but it's not like they try to complement each other in terms of style. So yeah, 2010s fashion. Remember the time? What do you remember of 2010s? Let me give you a little hint. Alexander McQueen's skull scarves, Balenciaga city bags. There was a lot of gothic grunge.
Yeah.
The It Girls, we had like Misha Barton. Alexa Chung was another one.
The
and
Olsen
that was
sisters.
the Olsen twins were like, they were deemed
that
as
was like
fashion
big handbag era.
It was.
Do you remember? Like that is like we've definitely referenced it here on the podcast before, where like there's this picture. I think it's with Mary-Kate, and she's got the most battered like Birkin bag.
Yeah, I think she still wears it.
And yeah, it's like but like also she was super slim, and she's got this ginormous, like I think it must be an extra large. Like it was a really large bag, and she's like carrying it.
Yeah.
And it was very much like, considering now the smaller the bag that you can get away with to be out in the day, the better.
Yeah.
This was like a statement bag. It was just very festival-y.
There was a lot of bohemian. I think a lot of the style that we saw them dress in carries over to the row now. So we see really muted colours. Back then they wore a lot of black, even now so.
Yeah.
A lot of layering, a lot of scarves.
I remember one time they exclusively pretty much went out in black.
Yeah.
Like I think there was a point where they sort of wanted to totally like neutralise, I think, their look, and they pretty much only wore black.
Yes.
And like big black sunglasses to kind of just be like our style now is not the thing in question. Like it's our designs. That's how I used to see it.
Okay.
Like there's nothing to see here. Again, we're all in black.
Okay.
You know?
I saw it as a different way, but I'll explain later.
Okay. Yeah.
So Elizabeth and James, that line was like a chance for them to kind of, their designs highlighting like vintage pieces, like, you know, hard to find, that kind of, that vintage thrifting thing that was coming about was an Elizabeth and James aesthetic very much. And in the row, we see this like incredibly more elevated like version of their style.
Yeah.
So yeah, granny chic is something that's very dear to my heart. I absolutely love granny chic, and I think that's why, like, when researching the Olsen twins, it was like, mate, they've got some great pieces. And then as I said, grunge, bohemian styles with what they came to be famous for. Yeah. So now on to more specifically about the row itself, because for the first few years, they actually didn't do interviews about their brand. Did you know that? It was quite interesting. I think like part of the desire to distance themselves from the brand, and you'll actually like this, at the beginning, they said that they started their designs from the viewpoint of like, let's take a basic white t-shirt and let's see how we can make the perfect white t-shirt. And like, their approach to fashion was solely about the silhouette and the materials. So it was like, let's use the most luxurious materials that we can find and make sure that the proportions and the silhouette are like on point. And that's like the combination.
I would say that still stands to this day. Like I think that is, they're a very expensive price point. like they're a really expensive luxury brand, and their designs aren't like, oh my god, they're not mind blowing, they're nothing new, you know, but that it is, you can tell it is like, you can tell it's elite, you can tell it is like on another level.
Yeah.
You can like, and that's what makes it great. It's not like, oh my god, it's like a t-shirt that's been ripped in like 10 places. You can tell like, that's a really beautiful t-shirt, that's a really beautiful coat, you can tell it's a really great suit, like they have considered that stuff, and that's what makes it elevated
Yeah.
and still very like fashion forward or like an interesting design, because they've made those commitments to
Yeah.
the garment
Definitely.
tech of it.
Yeah. And I think that the row, back to your previous point about them wearing like nothing but black as a way to put the attention on their brand, I actually think that the row is, they design what they want to wear. I think the row is a complete representation of their style. And I think the reason why the colors are quite muted, they use a lot of blacks, grays. In the most recent collections, they've got like khaki, olive, and like touches of red, like some, like a little bit of color here and there, but not a lot. I think that is because their focus is on material and on silhouette, and it's not about print. It's not about color.
I don't think I can recall a single thing that's printed.
I don't think I've ever seen anything that's printed. I've seen something that's been embroidered, but that's the materials thing.
Yeah.
I've seen things that are embossed,
Yeah.
a lot of exotic skins, but yeah, nothing that's printed with pattern and color, and yeah, that's not them.
And also to add, like, for anyone who might be like, oh, but surely all luxury fashion chooses the best fabric and the most luxurious. And it's like, oh, no, 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 no. Like, you'd be surprised. And although maybe that's how, like, a Chanel or a Dior started, even though I don't think it was, that's not how they remain. A lot of these brands start to skimp on that. Like, a company I worked for, it was really important that she had a certain grade and level of leather, and then like in time, and the hardware was plated with X, and in time they're like, but your margins could be better, or like this is how.
Yes.
And you can get convinced into like scrimping, and is like a famous thing that Chanel's bags aren't made to the quality that they were like back in the 90s, like that lots of people
the
actually,
hardware used to be gold plated, and now
that
they're
people
not.
seek after actually like a vintage almost more than they would seek after one from now, because it's made better and it's gonna last better. So that's actually a really unique thing for a brand to be taking that stance. And so for them to kind of go down that path that was basically open territory, no one's done that or remained that, was like a really cool thing.
Yeah, and I think that lends us on to the next point about pricing. As you said, a lot of brands talk about margin. I think that when we compare a brand like The Row, do you know Gabriella Hearst? I think you do. They are both like, these brands are seen as like the closest comparable thing. Gabriella Hearst, she's like, from what I understand, quite interested in using materials of very little waste. Incredibly expensive, but they're both brands that are for like those New York socialites. They're not trying to like shift quantity.
They're not ever going to try to appeal to us.
No. And that's not, no, it's not about appealing to the masses or trying to shift a lot of bags like Louis Vuitton might want, you know? It is simply about, if you want it, you'll pay the price for it.
Yeah.
If you want the highest grade cashmere sweater,
you want the best,
you're going to
pay for it. Yeah. And I actually think that's a really, that garners, it's like, that's a quite luxury-esque thing. That's kind of like where Hermes, I feel like, was, and probably isn't. Like, Hermes has succumbed to the masses somewhat. For sure, they don't make the limited edition runs that they used to, because I see every girl and their donkey.
A lot of them's fake.
No, but like the amount of influencers I've seen who own or buy more than one Hermes in a year and all of that stuff.
Oh, I see.
In Chanel, what was that I sent you? In Chanel, you're only allowed to buy 2 bags a
Oh,
year or
yeah,
something.
yeah. They started a quota system as well. Yeah.
Because it was like that was something to do with gun crime. But I think that they're not like that's it's integrity to them, and it's kind of like, this is where we are. You either meet us there or like you don't.
Yeah. And
That's how a classy lady should be.
So this really explains the pricing. And a basic tee, you know, their perfect basic tee, was priced at about £400. Now, that is not necessarily unusual for a designer
I was
t-shirt.
gonna say 300 is probably like a designer t-shirt, right?
Yeah. But the argument could be said that with that, you at least get the logo on it, right? That's what people buy the designer t-shirts for.
Not me.
Not you, but
sorry, that was really weird.
But
yeah, some people,
most
like
people who buy the
people
t-shirts,
who are buying something for a lot of money are going to be like, oh well, at least everyone knows it's Gucci.
yeah, exactly. Theirs is a plain one because you're paying for the materials essentially. And there's actually a story that I read about this woman. This was in New York. She loved the cashmere sweaters that they did, and she bought 30 of them because she bought them in all the colors and stuff. She never wanted, like, say for example they discontinued them, she was like, that shit ain't happening to me. Yeah, I can't be without these sweaters. She bought 30 of them. 30 grand in total
for £1,000.
Yeah, well, if a t-shirt
is
£400 and cashmere is, you know, so it's the idea of like, this is to rich people, to like properly rich people,
this is their Uniqlo.
There you go.
Maybe not, but like I get it.
And when you consider,
or like their Max Mara, there you go.
Their Max Mara, yeah, whatever.
Right, but it's where you get your quality, not even basics. I don't think that's fair to always say that, but they also do quality basics.
Yes, yeah. I understand what you mean. And not only are they incredibly wealthy themselves, so this is probably how they spend, but I mean, one of them was married, albeit for a short period of time, to like the half brother of the former president of France.
Yeah, French billionaire.
Yeah, he's like a financier, banker. And so these like, and the fact that they have like a head office in France as well as other places, but like you see them in Paris a lot. And I think that being part of, I hate to say it, an old money aesthetic,
Parisian chic.
Yeah. That they really are going after those who have unlimited money, so to speak.
And I wouldn't mind betting that, and I think this happens a lot when people are wealthy young, famous young, you spend a lot of time with grown-ups. Like they started working at a really young age, and so you hang out with quite an older crowd. That's why we do see like child actresses often like go marry somebody older, because they were old before their time.
Yes.
And so I wouldn't mind betting they actually spent a lot of time around older people who potentially influenced, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think so as well. Like they're in their like, because they're in their mid-30s, they're not old, but they don't dress, and also the brand is very trendless. They have their own style, they have their aesthetic, and that's what they do. They don't follow the trends, and it is quite a grown-up approach to fashion, quite frankly. So their first editorial was in Forbes, of course, with Lauren Hutton on this motorcycle, in their leather stretch leggings. So very cool. And that was one of their like first big moments where their brand was like out there, you know, and being worn and styled alongside other designers.
Wow.
So yeah, quite a cool moment for them. And then, like, as reading about the brand, I came across some really quite cool descriptions of, you know, how the row is seen. And it called it like puritanical monastic. So, like, imagine like being in a monastery, like it's grandeur, yet it's like simplicity, and like how grand it feels. It's not minimalist, although the colors are simple, but there's like a lot of draping and there's a lot of form and silhouette. I think I saw on their website recently they've got this, what seems like this trench coat that is tucked into this like bell shaped skirt, like that sort of thing you don't see all the time. Also this like oversized wool coat with almost feels like this big sash across the top, and that is also wool in the same color. It's like monochromatic, but you know, the use of like really luxurious fabrics can't be seen as like minimalist in that sense. And also somebody made a really interesting point that, like, you know how the word luxury is like thrown about everywhere, and quite most of the time it's used to just refer to the price of something. Like something's expensive, it's luxury, and that's not necessarily.
That's why I felt it was like important to make the point of like, just because something's from Fendi, like the quality could be like not loads better from Zara. Like that doesn't equal quality. We've said that before. Price tag does not equal quality in these places. You're kind of paying for the honor to be wearing their brand and their design, amongst a lot of it.
Definitely. And the point was that, like, when you're able to buy something that's off the rail and it already feels like it's part of your wardrobe, that is a sign of like luxury. And I took that to mean like it already feels like lived in, part of your own style, part of like your wardrobe. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, but that also like screams a very wealthy. My £500 t-shirt. But I get it. I think that's a real compliment to any designer, that like, because it sort of also speaks to the timeless. It's not trend driven. That's what it speaks to. It just fits right in. It's not like, oh, it's just some random outfit. Because ultimately, and I think that they seem to achieve this as well with sort of their, whilst they do like show at the correct times for fashion weeks and stuff like that, it is very trendless. Like, there is no way, I don't think trends are the same as it was, but even if you're wearing a row jacket from 2 summers ago, it doesn't feel like, oh god, that was a time, like, calm, like, why are you still wearing that? There isn't any element of that, and that is like a really special thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. So they've actually won a couple of awards for their, I mean,
the girls have.
Yeah. It's one of those things that when you're like famous, it's easier to get these CFDA awards, I think. But in 2015, they won a CFDA award for women's wear. It's a pretty big one.
But that took 9 years. 9 years to get that.
Yeah, but things take time, isn't it? And if they were giving it like 3 years in, we'd be like, come on now.
Yeah.
And in 2019, so quite recently, they won a CFDA award for accessories.
So I don't know when they started their accessories line, but their accessories are super popular.
Yeah.
That I can tell. Like, I don't mean it's like, you know, you see it on everyone. But again, like, there's no logo, and it's really hard to create a logoless bag, like, that looks nice but also suits a, like, having an accessory line like that, like, isn't an easy feat to kind of like achieve it to fit in.
Yeah.
And I think they've done a really good job of their bags.
Yeah. They I've seen pictures, they wear their bags, you know, they definitely wear their collection, and their bags are not actually very expensive in terms of luxury bags.
Their clothes relative to other brands are expensive, but their bags seem to kind of fall in line. I would say.
So they've got one called the Sophia crossbody, and it's $3,000, which is cheaper than Chanel. In line with,
like,
I guess,
Loewe a bit.
Fendi, Loewe, So yeah, not crazy, but yeah, they've won their second award only about 4 years ago. During the pandemic, though, the brand did suffer some turmoil in that they had to let half the people go, and they've had like a bit of a changing of the guard. Like the CEO left, and they, I believe, are now in the CEO position. But I mean, that was kind of like the same for, not the same for a lot of brands. A lot of brands had to let people go, and they also, when Barney's went bankrupt, that was like their biggest account, and so they had to start to like what they call trim down a bit
Yeah.
because it was such a massive account. Like you can't operate in the same way as they were doing before.
I know Barney's under.
I think we covered it when we just started our podcast because there were like, was it Macy's as well? There was like a couple of them that were like really shaky. And I think there was a period of time where like department stores, the name and the online presence got bought out, but then like the department store got just let go.
Shut go.
Yeah.
Shut go.
But yeah, even now it makes a profit. So sorry, Vicky. But
She does now.
but yeah, it still continues to be successful, and I think even now, like more so in the era of stealth wealth, quiet luxury, and then just in general, I think that the trends, or the dominant trend, there's a lot of trends going on, but there is everything's sleek, more pared down. We're going for glowy skin as opposed to
piling on the makeup,
lots and lots of makeup. We're going for quality over quantity and over flashiness. We're going for things that aren't too brand heavy in case that brand ends up being quite controversial and things like that.
That's so true.
And so I think that the Row, they've never really wavered on their vision, but now there's a moment.
Which is tough, right? Because they were two very young girls, like, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but to not change the vision that you create for a brand that you like, you don't have any experience and you don't know if your style or your vision is going to change at any point, but it hasn't. And like, I bet the first few years were tough and maybe didn't see a reward and maybe didn't see a profit, but they just very much persevered with it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like they either have very good senses of selves or had help like with that sense of self-direction for this brand.
Well, they had designers, so that's good. I think it's always good when you hire people who know how to create a vision.
Yeah. And a collection and all of that stuff. And I also think, and I wonder if you feel this too. I think in a post-pandemic world, I think people are buying into fashion more than ever.
I don't know. I really don't know.
Like, I kind of just feel like whatever it might be, it doesn't necessarily have to be like designer, but whether or not it is people spending like 150 quid on a hoodie, like I feel like there is just this sort of like, and maybe that's the luxe kind of, or the quiet luxury, like that flex of like, oh, if you don't know, this is a represent £155 hoodie, like kind of a thing, or oh, these Yeezys that are £200. I think that people are choosing to spend money on those things, so I wouldn't mind betting like that maybe also the Row has now got potentially the tier underneath, like the socialites, potentially reaching for those garments too. Because there are definitely people who are reaching out of their bands right now.
It's aspirational for people.
I think that's potentially like, we did all dream of who we would be and what we would wear after the pandemic. And I think some people are like working to make that a reality.
Yeah, I do think
I would love to own a coat from them one day.
Oh yeah, 100%. I would.
Like, their coats, and if you go on there, phenomenal.
If you actually look at their full collections, there are pieces that are like, this is really cool.
Yeah,
this is like really nice, and yeah, but it's not not everything's like boring and done before. Some of it is like, wow, this is really quite cool. The dresses, though maybe seemingly simple, the way it drapes, the way it moves, the fabric, you're like, this would be a special piece to someone, you know?
But I feel like those also are the examples, right, of when we did our episode of like, is it a nice dress, or is she just skinny, or like is it just her body? They kind of like, there is no argument. It is the skill, and it is like the dress. You know what I mean? What they really play with tailoring, which is clearly like the row, but they make sure that the tailoring, or like how they've draped it, or how they've kind of like manipulated the fabric, is interesting and clever and exciting. And like, that's a really fun thing to celebrate when you see someone doing something and you're like, that might be a black dress, but I've not seen a black dress like that.
Yeah.
Like,
definitely.
and that is, I think, the row.
Yeah. Last point about the row is when you actually, what I find interesting about the idea of their vision and how they approach it. If you go on their Instagram, it's not filled with product. It is pieces of like vases and artwork and pieces that might serve as inspiration to them.
It's like the full, like the row aesthetic.
Yeah.
Like their Pinterest, what we imagine their Pinterest board is.
Exactly. And you go on their website and there's a selection called Gallery, and it's vintage pieces of jewelry from the 50s and 30s, and it says price upon request. And so you can reach out and see if like that gold cuff made in the 1930s, who maybe like belonged to someone else, or that jeweled necklace or whatever, you can see it's in your price point and like buy it, because they have always been vintage jewelry accessory girlies. And so yeah, I think it's refreshing when they're still trying to honor the idea of, you know, exclusive and really looking for like gems in fashion. But yeah, that's the Row, a really interesting brand.
I love them.
Yeah,
and also good for them.
Definitely. I think it's,
and that's not an easy job. And like, I could be naive in thinking it, but I think they're in the office. Like, I think they are putting the work in.
I think they do.
I'm not saying they're sat there doing the sketches, but I think that they are overseeing design meetings. I think they are there. I think they are being brought, like, I think they're doing that daily grind. I think they have their entire diary filled with meetings.
Yep, I think so. I believe the hype.
I believe it. And actually, like, I believe that of Victoria Beckham, like,
less so, but
like maybe like 70%. I believe that, because she also sort of seems to just like live her life a bit.
Yeah, she's enjoying life.
But I do think that they're there to work.
Definitely.
And they probably helped pave the way for Phoebe.
Listen, when you start working at 9 months old, all you can do is work. But yeah, let us know what you think about the Row. Do you love them, hate them, think they're overrated? If you have the chance and the money, would you spend your money on the Row? Let us know. Anyway, thanks for watching our episode. You can reach out to us on styleoversubstancepodcast@gmail.com, or on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube,
all the places.
Yeah. See you next week, guys. Bye.